We're going to be looking at intuition as learning from within, as part of the process of living in harmony with the ecology, in harmony with each other, and in harmony with ourselves on this planet. And most of us weren't taught. In fact, we were taught not to use this sense. I know sometimes I've gotten up in front of groups of people, and mostly women in their 80s would say, well, I used to do this all the time. I used to have this skill, but it was beaten out of me when I was a child. And I totally get that. In our culture, the focus has been on the analytical, the left brain, being verbal, being linear in our thinking, not relational, not holistic, not getting operating from a sense of what works and what doesn't work. And so as we move forward, we're needing to overcome a lot of our old teaching. We have to learn to trust the inner feeling. And as we trust it, as we work with it, as we go with it, then it becomes stronger. A lot of us have made decisions based on the analysis against a sense that, this doesn't feel right. But even the best CEOs, I remember Jack Welch, way back in the 70s, said, the analysis only carries me so far, and then I have to trust the gut. And that's Jack Welch. He actually wrote a book as CEO of GE, straight from the gut. Yep. So we don't want to get talked into things that don't feel right. We don't want to talk ourselves into things that don't feel right because the analysis tells us that it should be that way. So the context for this work is a physics context, actually. It's recognizing that what matter is not something solid. We want to believe that this is solid. We want to believe these things that we're surrounded with are solid. But in fact, they're forms of energy that are constantly changing. And they're taking form in the presence of mind. You can follow the work on the double slit experiment if you want. There's a wonderful introduction on YouTube, Dr. Quantum and the double slit experiment, that helps you to see that without an observer, energy remains energy. Only in the presence of an observer does energy become matter, which led quantum physicist Amit Goswami, A-M-I-T Goswami, to write a book called The Self-Aware Universe to help to explain how there could be anything solid before human beings were around. So that's one thing, that matter is energy, forms of energy constantly changing and taking the form of matter in the presence of mind. A second concept from physics is that time and space are boundless. We say that the universe is infinite, and we say there is no beginning or end to time. And eternal means, that at any given point, it could go on forever. Any given point, any given life goes on forever, without a beginning, without an end. And that all the points are accessible to the mind. All right, that goes back to matter as forms of energy. Energy exists everywhere. That's the essence of the Heisenberg principle and Schrodinger's cat. We can never say where something is when it's in energy form. It is everywhere, always. And that's the essence of non-locality, or spooky action at a distance. If you've heard any of these terms from physics, it's because it's everywhere until it collapses into a point, into a moment, into a form, into an experience. And mind, more and more evidence is showing us, is energy, not form. That there is a field of energy around the being that is the mind of the being. It's not what's going on in the brain, although what's in the brain is an important piece of how mind functions, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The next point is from psychology and specifically neurology, neurophysics, and a little bit into parapsychology. When we perceive, we usually use our five senses, right? We touch, we see, we hear, we taste, we smell. These are our five senses, and they're how we perceive things. But it turns out we all have inner senses as well. There's a wonderful book by Rupert Sheldrake called The Sense of Being Stared At. And he did some marvelous experiments all over the world where someone would sit behind someone where they couldn't see them. And they would either be looking at them or not looking at them. And if they were looking at them, almost invariably, the person who was being stared at would turn to find out what was going on. That was not an external sense. It was not one of the normal 5 senses. And he's done a lot of other work. Rupert Sheldrake has done some amazing work as a microbiologist that is helpful in all of this. All right. So what this suggests is that if we are living as if the only thing that exists is our 5 senses and the physical material stuff we're used to thinking of as reality, we operate with very limited energy. But when we begin to realize unlimited energy, unlimited mind, unlimited awareness, if we tap into what I talked about in the consciousness series or session of this series, we're tapping into the collective consciousness, right? All of humanity. Ralph Waldo Emerson used to say there is one mind common to all mankind, all humanity, and each one of us is an inlet and an outlet to the same. Yes. So when we begin to realize that, we begin to realize that this infinite space in which we exist is an infinite flow of energy, we can realize that that flow of energy is constantly sustaining us, which is another principle from science. Nobel Prize winner Ilya Prigogine back in the 70s was outlining this as what he called dissipative structures. Things, material things like doors and bookcases and whatever, are temporary structures. They dissipate depending on the energy flowing through them. Our body is a dissipative structure. It dissipates as the energy flowing through it is reduced. And so if we think about ourselves as dissipative structures and we're open to the energy flows and we become, as this graphic suggests, limitless. Totally limitless. Our energy self is everywhere, always, throughout space and time. Our material self is here in this point in time. And if we're identifying as our energy or spiritual dimension, we're everywhere, always. And as we're identifying with the body, physical dimension, we are only here in this moment of space and time.